and welcome to chapter 26 of this video, of this course rather, organizational structure. So let's just dive into it. In the early stage of a company, before product market fit, when your team is 6 people or less, there is little value in creating a formal organizational structure or in creating a distinction among co-founders as to who the CEO is. But when product market fit is achieved, it is time to scale rapidly. And when you're scaling rapidly, you're going to need a really good organizational structure, a way that the organization exists. We're not even talking about functioning now, just the way that it exists, the structure of the company. When we say team, what are we referring to in the team? What are the positions in that team? That's where this is going. And this will entail growing the team significantly and having departments. That's where you start having departments like sales, engineering, and so on and so forth. Certainly, a structure is required because not everyone can fit effectively in one team meeting. Separate teams must be created, and each requires a manager. The answer is to both identify the CEO and create a written organizational structure. One of the jobs I've done in the past is creating an organogram for a company. A client reached out to me and they said they were trying to create an organogram and they didn't have the time to do so and that they wanted external help. And so I asked questions, really, we went back and forth, and then I presented a simple organogram. And all she needed, she just said she needed one page, just a simple structure. And then we got done after asking several questions and getting to understand the context in our organization. Then the leadership team is typically the CEO. As your organization grows and you get to a point of product market fit, you have the CEO, you have the head of product, you have the head of engineering, head of sales, head of marketing, head of customer success, head of operations. Each of these department heads then has a team that they manage. Once you adopt an organizational structure, write it down and make it public to the company. There should be no confusion about who reports to whom and what team meeting each person attends. So you have the CEO, head of product, head of engineering, head of sales, head of marketing, head of customer success, head of operations. So titles by Alex McCall. When you're first starting out, it can be quite tempting to hand out titles without much process. After all, they are free. This is funny. He says titles are free. And yeah, in a company, you don't buy titles. Although in other social structures, you might have to do certain things like in Nigeria, in my country, for you to become a chief, that is a representative in a community, you have to invest in the community. There are different communities and all that, and different communities have their stipulations. But generally, if you have good reputation and you've done some social good projects for the company, the king of that company, local company, I said company, community, will invite you to join his representative committee and then make you a titled chief. So sometimes in that process, you have to spend money, invest into the community, give back to the community. But it says in a company, it is essentially free. The process is free. You don't have to, well, you have to invest your energy, contribute to the company, but it's not like you're becoming a a a a type, like having a title in the company is based on what you have achieved for the company. No, from the point of recruitment, you're given a title. So however, a misplaced title can come back to haunt you. Take, for example, the circumstance of making a senior hire and asking an existing team member to report to them. If you've already handed that existing team member a fancy title, this will be viewed as a demotion and you may lose them. One easy solution is to just call everybody head of X. Call everyone head of X, okay? That way, when it's finally time to hire senior VPs, they can slot easily into the organization without demoting anyone. Okay. Yeah, for a small team. head of, even though it's just one person, he's head of X. Then when you're recruiting like somebody who is more experienced into the company, and then you make them senior VP, then they wouldn't really feel like they're demoted. So leadership versus VPs meeting. As the company grows, each team will become a large entity. You have BizOps, design, communications, compliance, etc. An individual product may grow large enough to warrant its own business unit with its own GM. Thus, there will be many VP level execs. You will want to keep them informed and empowered. There will be temptation to invite them to attend the leadership team meeting. Do not, literally, do not invite VPs into leadership team meeting. Leadership team is one step ahead of VPs. It says do not invite them into leadership team meetings. If someone needs to attend the meeting in order to be informed about what occurs in that meeting, then you have not yet created a transparent system. Each meeting should have clear notes of all updates given and decisions made other than those around compensation and individual performance improvement. Those notes should be freely published to the company so everyone can know what happened in a meeting without actually attending. The meeting then just becomes a way of making good and fast decisions. The meeting then becomes a way of making good and fast decisions. So it says these notes in the meeting will be published. So the VPs do not need to attend the meeting because essential notes will be published. The leadership meeting should be attended by your brain trust. Who are the key minds that you need to hear from to make great decisions, and who run the major business units that you need to make sure are continually unblocked? These should be the attendees of the leadership team meeting. Do not add any other attendees to salve their ego. They will just make the meeting less efficient. So you don't need the numbers. That's what it's saying. You just need your brain trust. The people who should be in your leadership meeting should be people who form your brain trust. For all the rest of your department and team leads, there is a VP's meeting or leads meeting. At this meeting, decisions that were just made in the leadership meeting are announced. Then there is a speak now or forever hold your peace moment. If any of these decisions will have unintended negative consequences, now is the time for the VPs to raise their hand and say, that is a terrible idea for these reasons. The decision gets kicked into a rapid, but for the vast majority of decisions, the VPs will be fine with it, and then the decision gets published to the company, likely in all ends. To understand the scale of these meetings, I posit that the leadership team should be and remain about 8 people. 6 to 10 is fine. The VP's meetings, by contrast, should grow as the company scales. At a company of 1,000 employees, the VP's meetings can often, rather, has 15 attendees. At Microsoft, this same meeting is over 150 attendees or so, I've been told. Well, Microsoft has more than 1,000 employees, so I wouldn't be surprised. Reorganizations, let me check for my battery level. So 30 more minutes. We should, we've come to the end of this part of the book. So next part is non-processes. So reorganizations. Reorgs like terminations are always disruptive and cause people angst, even if the logic for them is glaringly obvious. Full buy-in is impossible to achieve because you cannot solicit opinions from a wide group of people beforehand. Department heads should indeed be consulted ahead of time and then asked to prepare for the rollout. But this consulting prep time should be very short to minimize leakage of the reorg pre-announcement. So let's take that again. Department heads should be indeed consulted ahead of time. Department heads are sometimes VPs. Okay, they should be consulted or informed before you roll out a reorganization so that you minimize. But this consulting prep time should be very short so that you minimize leakage of reorg pre-announcement. So this exercise, the exercise then becomes akin to group crisis therapy. The key is that detailed explanation and Q&A session first in all ends, and then moving to departments and finally individual teams should happen immediately after the announcement of the reorg. A second key is to batch organizational changes. The org will need time to heal, even if you recognize needed org changes 6 weeks later. Batch them. I recommend 3 months as a bare minimum between org changes, but 6 months is better. So reorgs, like terminations, are always disruptive. So it says, even if you recognize needed org changes 6 weeks later, batch them. Okay, so a second key is to batch organizational changes. So the first key says the key is that detailed explanation should be given in all ends. It says a second key is to batch the changes. So you can batch the changes. It says here, I recommend 3 months as a bare minimum before org changes, but 6 months is better. Okay, so that is the end of this part. This part has been titled organizational structure, and I think it's really straight to the point because it's just around who is who in the company and what that means for communications within the organization, especially as the organization scales upwards and you get to product market fit. And then we've said that product market fit is that time in the organization where I think the number we had was like 1 million ARR, $1 million ARR, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I think so. So when you get to that point, you really want to have the structure around the organization. And as virtual executive assistants, or just about executive assistants, really, by the time the organization gets to that point, you become very important in the organization. That's where you sort of like don't just be aren't a VA or EA anymore. You're now being considered for a chief of staff position because the organization is growing bigger, and then the CEO is going to be lesser involved in the nitty gritties of the organization. Is now going to be involved in like bigger things, strategic and high level client relations for the operation for the organization. And then you, as the chief of staff or previous EA, becomes the person who helps the CEO maintain a calendar that is reflective of all their engagements so that they are present in the company that has become successful, but are also attending to all the bigger visions that they might have. So that's that on this chapter. In the next video, we're going to start with processes. But let's just talk about processes real quick so that in the next video, we'll look into chapter 27, fundraising. There'll be something nice to learn in fundraising, but it says for part 5, processes, inside your company's walls, you've got your key personnel in place and functioning effectively. Your data systems up and running, and information is flowing easily from your managers to your team members and vice versa. The last piece of the puzzle, of course, is your dealings with the outside world, with investors, recruits, customers. These processes, fundraising, recruiting, and sales, are all identical processes. They only differ in the content of the exchange. If fundraising, you are selling the company's equity and debt as a high quality investment, and the investor is compensating you with capital. In recruiting, you're selling the company as a high quality employment opportunity, and the new employee is giving you their time and effort as payment. In sales, you are selling your product as a high quality solution, and the customer is giving you money as payment. In each of these cases, someone is making the decision to invest in you or your company, whether with money or time. As such, you need to building trust to build trusting relationships with these decision makers in order to fundraise, recruit, or sell. Peter Reinhardt of Segment correctly points out, if it's also it is rather also a process of aligning a huge number of complex stakeholders to accomplish something bigger. What does it say? It's also a process of aligning a huge number of complex stakeholders to accomplish something better. That is how he defines processes within the organization. Aligning a huge number of complex stakeholders to accomplish something better. Remember, the customer is a stakeholder because they're giving you money and you're giving them a high quality product or solution. The investor is giving you capital, and in return, you are giving them company equity. And in recruitment, the employee is giving you their time and effort, but then you are giving them a high quality professional opportunity. So these are all stakeholders with interest and various needs and various reward mechanisms within the company. So process then describes how you manage all these stakeholders. It says here it's a process of aligning a huge number of complex stakeholders, and they can be very complex, to accomplish something together, whether it's your investor, it's your employee, or it's your customer. Everyone has interests and they have rewards. So how you manage everything describes the top level idea of process within a company. And then in chapter 27, we're going to look at one of those processes, one of those relationships, which is relationship between the company or the key team players in the company and the funders, the backers, whether that is an investment firm or it's the general public. So we're going to look at that in chapter 27. Thanks for watching and God bless.